Before we start our activity 2, I want to draw your attention to the examiner's report. So this is the BTEC examiner's report from Pearson's, and below is the marking scheme for activity 1 and a bit of activity 2. And although these points that I want to draw your attention to belong to activity 2, they affect activity 1 as well. First of all, let's look at the marking scheme down here, yeah? And you see that it doesn't say anywhere about using recognized naming conventions up here. This is activity 1. This is activity 1 marking scheme, yeah? And down here you have activity 2 marking scheme. And activity 1 marking scheme says nothing about recognized naming conventions. However, the recognized naming conventions that appear in activity 2 marking scheme, and we so far have done only activity 1, this naming convention appears in the design of the tables that we have done. And look at the name, yeah? TBL customer. And let me draw your attention to something else. Do you observe a difference between, for instance, let's say when it says customer ID here, look at your beach ID, your district ID. Do you see that basically there is no space there? So as well, house number, where we used 2 words in our database, we left a space. So that is something that we have to correct before we start activity 2 and before even we submit activity 1. So we better correct this, yeah? So basically we will put TBL in front of all our tables, table names, and we will deduct all the spaces so that each word is capitalized. Do you see this? If the word is composite, like it's made out of 2 or more words, each word is written with a capital. For instance, house number, house with capital, number with capital, no space. Customer ID, C for customer ID capital, ID, the whole thing capital, no space. So basically that's what we have to do with our database. As you see as well here, that is not regarded at all in activity 1, but it appears in activity 2. So let's go to our database and correct this, change this, yeah? So this is our database. We rename the table rename. We say TBL. We rename each of the tables. So here are 4 tables, they're all changed. And now if we were doing activity 1, we take this screenshot here, okay? As you saw, the tables did not appear here, but they were there initially. So what I did is right click in the gray area here, and I said show all. Probably because we changed the names, the tables disappeared from here. But by right clicking and saying show all, we have them again. So you don't need to say show table and get the tables back up there. We can see TBL, all the changes are done here. And now we need to change individually each of the tables. Right click, design view, the beach table. We get rid of the spaces. That's the only ones that have spaces. And you can see here there is B capital, N capital. That is the naming convention, yeah? So to capitalize each word separately and no spaces. There's another way, but we don't need to do that, is to join them with underscores. So we would have in that case this. So I'm showing to you this option, but let's stick to one thing, yeah? So if we now save that, we go back to the table that we just changed in design view, and you see that there is no gaps. Let me do it in all the tables. So let's open all the tables, design view, design view, design view, design view. You see there is no gaps here. Each word starts with a capital. So beach name, the N and the B start with a capital. The B and the T start with a capital. So here we have district ID. District and ID start with a capital. District name start with a capital, and so on and so forth. Same thing here. Here we have 3 words. Each word starts with a capital. And as well here, 3 words. Each word starts with a capital. C, R, R. They may not mark you for naming conventions in activity 1, but just don't risk it, because as you saw for activity 2 down here, The marking scheme regards the naming convention. It's in the Band 3 marking scheme area where you are awarded marks for naming conventions. You will lose these marks otherwise. As well, the examiner up here talks about this in Activity 2. Most candidates used standard naming conventions, and he praises that. Relationships in Access are showing here. Yeah, this is the screenshot that we have to submit. You might lose points for hiding names. So for instance, if somebody submits that, make sure that before you take your screenshot that everything is clear. Here we have naming conventions, no gaps in the names. Every word starts with a capital if it's more than one. So if it's a composite word, for instance, here we have actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Each word starts with a capital. And that's what you have to do, and this is the screenshot more or less that you have to submit. So let's move on to the next lesson.